All right. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to IT-Conductor. This is Lin Nguyen, and I have today David Stavisky, my co-founder, on the channel. Today's show is 2026 Enterprise Tech Predictions. All right, and relevant to our space, why we think Agentic AI will redefine SAP operations and kill passive observability. So we think that just watching and monitoring alone will die a slow death, maybe a quick death, depending on how how you pivot in this solution. So with that said, opening the show today, I am Lin Nguyen, the CEO co-founder of IT-Conductor, and David is our CTO. He's the head of platform and product management. So we've been playing around with this space for quite a long time. So it's time to throw some bold predictions out there, maybe not so bold, depending on what angle you come from. So actually, what matter in 2026 in enterprise IT, according to us, who is currently very SAP centric, enterprise wide, we really think that AI is not a hype anymore. Doing just demos on how to do something is not exactly very useful, and just a bunch of dashboards don't really do the work anyway for autonomous IT operations. So this is really about running IT efficiently in the age of agentic AI. So in 2026, in relation to SAP folks, there's been a lot of migrations that we've seen in S4 and also RISE, etc. I think migrations are done in terms of talking about it. There's lots of challenges. Obviously, most customers, in fact, I was just off a call this morning with a customer, and they realized that hybrid environment is the reality, right? So there's no, you got to go to cloud and all, be all and all. So operating in this complex hybrid environment today means that essentially you need to take the next step in innovating for the hybrid environment. It's not saying that, hey, you got to go cloud, adopt all cloud stuff, but your tools, your process, or your regular manual handling today of manual operation tasks, that's got to change because, all these run books won't survive with the age of kind of, I have too many clouds, multi-cloud, on-prem, and people everywhere, and all of this stuff I think is gonna die. So you need a continuous solution that's a control block, a control plane, and not just a tool chain, a bunch of tools. They like to keep everything kind of the same, like same team, same tool, but in reality, it's not. Most of that stuff will break, and they need to start planning to that, get into more of a proactive role in managing operations, and not saying, hey, just because I hand over operations to a managed service provider, that I'm done with managing my stuff, right? It just got a little bit more from a role responsibility diverse, but the control plane is still not innovative if they're keeping their old operations.
Yeah, I actually think that the main developments will be in the area of tooling, enabling the AI agents to act. That means primarily efforts in building the MCP servers all around. So most of the applications will start introducing the MCP servers for manageability. That's my prediction. Maybe this year, maybe spread over a few years, but that's the future. So in essence, this is a pluggable infrastructure that allows each application to publish what can be done about it, both query and actionable stuff. So we actually shifting toward the conversational and
Yeah. So I think that's kind of a migration. I say is going, and it's gonna happen regardless, and it's not important. Important is where you land and what you're gonna do when you land there. So that leads me to kind of topic number 2. What we think in a prediction is like agentic AI becomes authorized to act, right? So we've seen already lots of people out there posting and doing. So going from co-pilot and inquiring and things like that, and we're moving towards more AI operators as opposed to just co-pilots. We're gonna definitely go from recommendation to actions, right? Um, and also we've seen a lot of things where human in the loop, yeah, check this, read this, maybe I do this, but we go into more kind of handling only human in the loop during an exception, right? So if the automation mode runs something and maybe something still needs some attention, that's when the human come involved. But the first, I think we're going to go towards action first, right? We're going to detect, correlate whatever integral full stack of SAP infrastructure, etc. And then based on historical incidents or context, execute that immediate remediation, right, autonomously. So that's definitely the theme that we want to say is like, the agentic AI orchestration replaces that static automation or rule-based, traditional enterprise IT operations, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think the biggest impact will be when configurations are enabled to be acted upon by agents. That
Mhm.
will be what really will it will be a watershed moment, because as we know, 90% of problems today occur because of botched configurations, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Performant anymore.
Mhm.
So then performance becomes kind of non-issue with commoditization of the hardware and everything. AI is driving it pretty fast. The commoditization.
Right. Mhm.
So the resources become cheap, but configurations and how AI agents will deal with that
Mhm.
will determine how effective this actionable and autonomous IT will be. But yeah, let
Yeah. So that's kind of like related to configuration and change management, right? So maybe, I'd say, for instance, if they find something, let's say in monitoring, you find a misconfig that's causing some problem, the autonomous agent will detect that this is deviating from recommendation of the ideal config or acceptable tested config, and then it's going to automatically realign, right? So, for instance, if you set a parameter wrong, it's causing dumps in your system. It's detecting that and look at the configuration deviation and say, oh, yeah, that is a dynamic parameter. I can change that and realign the system in real time, right?
yeah, yeah. So, but this is a big leap, right? Uh,
Yeah, yeah. So that talks about the topic we talked about actually is the death of passive observability. Our prediction is that passive observability, which all of these platforms out there for many years has been preaching observability and nice charting and nice dashboard, is very passive because in the nature that it provides information, but it depends on the person looking at that information to interpret and to analyze and then maybe uh, pull from the experience what is the next set of actions. While in enterprise IT, that could mean the elapsed time between detection of something that's maybe going to happen, and by the time you decide something, the already critical phase has already been triggered, right? So, like for instance, I don't know, performance getting bad, and then it gets worse, and then the whole system stops. So instead of that passive observability, you're going into more um, triggered based on autonomous actions to resolve the detected scenario, right? So instead of observe, right, and notify, and then they stop, we're gonna go beyond that because that model fell in scaling, because you need somebody to be watching the alerts and then analyzing the scenario, root cause analysis, and then deciding and hugging around and deciding what is the best of action. So that may elapse, let's say, an hour, and you only have 15 minutes. So in an enterprise IT world, that will fail. So passive observability needs to move into what we call the actionable stage, right? Stop analyzing, start action. And of course, you have to limit first in what your increase number of things you need to keep an eye out. And then the slow kind of mean time to repair. If you do this, takes X amount of time to decide and do, right? Goes into more scalable, take the action in probably 90% of the case. The action will succeed. The 10% may be exception where somebody else may get involved. But that's kind of really the agentic side of things, is to really move from detection to deciding and then act, and then learn from that action whether it was successful or not successful, what can be done better, right? So this is a kind of an evolution of autonomous agents taking over traditional decision making on remediation stuff. So I think that's kind of the theme there. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, my opinion about observability in general, I think it's a sort of a scam. Uh,
Yeah.
it kind of pointless if you think about it, especially considering what I said before about the commoditization of the hardware and everything, which been going on forever, right?
Mhm.
So the performance, pure performance, and the analysis of the massive amount of data they ingest.
Mhm.
Uh, you pay in a lot for storage, for analytics, for ingest, for all that stuff. And what do you get in return? Nothing really. I mean, storage is cheap
Mhm.
comparing to everything else. So it's just easier to over-engineer the whole thing, and it's cheaper than spend lots of man hours and hard dollars to purchase the service and store humongous amount of information and analyze it, and then do what with it? Nothing, right? The only
Mhm.
thing that is capacity planning. But again, with commoditization of everything, it's really not that important anymore because it is cheap. Yeah, I can understand when you're dealing with thousands of VMs and you need to optimize the VM performance
Yeah. I mean,
scale.
I would say in that respect, observability only exists for capacity planning kind of purpose, right? So like cost optimization, looking at trending for more about how consolidation or saving of cloud costs or compute storage, but not in real time management or operations.
Even that, even capacity planning is somewhat
Uh-huh.
diminished, becoming diminished, let's say, over
Yeah.
time.
Uh-huh.
It's always been about watching the configurations, correlating them to the
Uh-huh.
issues that you have with the end users have with the service or quality of service, because
Uh-huh.
this is really what impacting it, as we know. So
Uh-huh.
being able to act upon it's essential. So without it, you
Uh-huh.
don't really have much of the case. Why keep paying for it when
Uh-huh.
you can just pay half of that for over engineering the system? So
Yeah. Let's move on. Next segment, I have very recently talked to a customer that, they are a hybrid customer. They've got some in cloud, some on-prem, some on latest, S4, some on, older SAP technology, some on HANA, some on non-HANA databases. So that's the reality, as I mentioned earlier, is about hybrid environment. So what they need, and when they talk to us, it was more like, hey, we're not short of tools. We have tools. We have, whatever tool for monitoring. We have this and that. But I listened to it for about 10 minutes, and they themselves expressed that they need a central control plane, right? Because right now, for observability or chatting, they're using some open source software to, show management these nice, pretty charts. And we know this management likes nice, pretty charts and dashboards. But the operational team is saying, hey, we need a central control plan. So what does that mean? So our prediction is that the enterprise control plan becomes much more a reality in 2026, because you need to not only looking at individual signals, but you need to normalize it. You need to apply policies. You need to orchestrate all these automation, both traditional and agentic type tooling for taking care of these actions, right? And to do that, you can't do it with traditional just single software platform where they do ingest of data and show you nice dashboards and send alerts, right? You have to go beyond that, and that means it's a control plane, because when you take action, it's control, right? It's not observe anymore. You have to decide and act, and it's done by autonomous agents behind the scene. That's got to be core to the positioning of 2026 and beyond. And I think this is kind of what we're predicting. Just observing itself won't do it, but talking about it won't happen either. You have to have the platform that is already built as the central control plane, or we used to call in the monitoring world, managers of managers, right? But now we're not just managing data only. We're orchestrating, we're coordinating, and then we're elevating the playing field into areas where it's taking the data, making recommendations automatically, associating tools that it can do autonomously, and then orchestrating that in a fashion where it's using context. The data that uses enriches the actual action itself, not just running some dumb action, right?
I see it as a consolidation of both the manageability and observability into really one platforms across the board. So those who cannot do either will fall by wayside. Those who can do both will start replacing it, especially augmented with the agentic workflows. It's time for the consolidation and the platformalization of everything. So you got to get a platform that
Right.
control a plane at the same time. It also can coordinate the ingest of data and manage the whole thing. Otherwise, I mean, why bother? It's just too many tools,
Yeah.
too many touch points. And unfortunately, the open source community, I mean, it's not known for building robust solutions. So they're good at something, but then the rest is neglected. So you end up with a partial solution, then lots of labor involved to integrate that, stitch it together, and then keep it running somehow.
Well, we see this, in fact, this past year in 2025. I mean, we ourselves talked to quite a few product companies, potential partner companies, potential investment companies that, open dialogue with us. And we definitely see the need that this industry needs to consolidate. Like, I would say 60% of players need to go away or completely or be ingested through M&A and fit into a larger conglomerate who do align with I need this central control plane, and right now I'm not doing it. I need to get all these tools and maybe ingest it and merged it and productize into a single platform. The problem with that approach, as we know, is integration is hard, right? I mean, if you didn't build from the ground up to be in our case, IT-Conductor is kind of a agentic workflow right fit, because more than 15 years ago we already said, oh, automation is the key, right? Everything else revolve around automation. So we're well fitted for this kind of orchestration framework in the agentic age. So all these other platforms, and I won't name names, but we have plenty of products listed on our site for competitive analysis. um, they are scrambling to buy, right? Because they said we don't have time to build. We're going to buy this guy, buy that guy. So that all sounds fine until the point where they try to actually align it to some central architecture and becomes an integration nightmare. So I think there's going to be very big consolidation this year in terms of this towards this control plane. So I actually want to talk to you, David, a little bit about our Q4 2025 that we enable the platform side in terms of the agentic kind of whole AI push that enables us to basically be the next stage or the next generation of automation here. You want to talk a little bit about what we got out there in terms of capabilities?
Sure, it's less of a prediction, but
Well, we're predicting what we're gonna do based on what we already deployed.
exactly, we already have it. So we went through some motions over the years to figure out what agentic AI, how to incorporate it and how to take advantage of it. And at some point, we just found out that we're already there almost. IT-Conductor was built on the foundation of process automation.
Mhm,
So everything that was around was really the foundation was the processes and activities and dependencies and stuff like this.
mhm,
So when we introduced the agentic stuff, it just fit right in. So in reality, it's again my kind of allegory is that it's a person, right?
mhm,
So you have ability to hire people with maybe average intelligence, but skilled because they can
mhm,
read documentation, unlike most of the people. So we just incorporated this really into these all workflows and automation. So it seamlessly plugs in. But instead of coding and saying this does that and that and that, you just write plain English, and the rest is history. Because yes, it talks to LLM, gets the instructions. In essence, you pass the tooling, and the tooling becomes super important. In agentic AI, the tools term determines the ability to query and act on data. And again, for us, it was very natural. So we just added tooling infrastructure, and it enabled the AI agents to do pretty much what a person can do with IT-Conductor.
mhm. Do you want to give us some example of like the type of tools, agents that can take actions, the
Yeah.
type of thing that we're talking about here?
Yeah, so tooling pretty much fall into two big categories: the query, read data, and act upon it and do something. All right. At some point, there was the idea of a RAG, retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So, but that didn't really caught up because catch up because it was a little bit heavy-handed. So you had to ship data somewhere else into the vector database, blah blah blah. So now everything is done through tools. So in essence, agent talks to LLM, says, "Okay, here's my task. How you do?"
Mhm,
So agent comes back, but before you do start the agent, you provide it with a list of tools. And tools can be something like, query the data, that specific data with certain parameters. For
mhm,
example, we define a tool, say, give me the list of SAP systems. Then we get create a tool that say, give me the all alerts for that specific SAP system.
mhm,
Then we say, I don't know, find the users on these SAP systems and their a number of logins and so on and so on. So we can build a lot of tools. And this is
mhm,
dynamics. It is not hard coded. So we go define them, and they used by all the agents. So when you send this information to the LLM, either through MCP, or we don't need MCP because we run inside IT-Conductor. So we just ship it in a formalized manner. Uh, and LLM knows now what tools it has at its disposal. So when you give it a task, it starts asking for information, but it
mhm,
says, call this tool, please, and bring me back the results.
mhm,
So, because when you create a tool, you describe what it does. So LLM understands what it has
okay.
at its disposal. So in essence, you give it all access. You give it eyes. These are eyes, right? So it understands what's there, so it can investigate. It can call back and say, "Okay, now call this tool and give me the results. Now give me the system uh, alerts. Well, that's because it knows what system you're talking about. Then it says, okay, give me the user on this system, the users on the system that were logged in at that time, and so on. And you can ask many things, whatever you provided. So these are eyes. Now comes the hands, right? The hands is the tools, the second category that they can do something. IT-Conductor is kind of unique because we don't really call anything directly. We create an object, and then the gateways or whatever on premises, they pick this object and say, execute that, and so on. So for us to give it hands was easy. We just have a bunch of tools that say create, I don't know, incident, create SAP job, create that and that and that and that, and create a SAP transport. And as soon as you create it, it's created. Agent comes back and say, okay, created with the such and such parameters. So the object is created, then the whole infrastructure start picking it up and executing it. So you don't need really interaction directly to the system, which you don't have because our customers are on-prem and or whatever in their cloud environments, and we are public, so we cannot really go and connect to them and execute them. That would be security, gigantic security hole, and you don't want to do that at all. So it enabled us to rapidly expand the hands part. So now the agent has the eyes and the hands, and it can do both. Understand what it is and then execute what needs to be done.
Okay.
Instead of now the processes slowly migrate. So for example, we have automation. The end user, we detect the password end user lockup, right? In SAP. It was locked because too many attempts, unsuccessful attempts. Today we have a rigid, I mean, not rigid, it's all composable workflow that says detect the alert coming from SAP, check the user, if user is locked, do something, and then change the password and unlock the user. So that is done through trial and error, so we can compose the workflow. In essence, it can be done with one AI agent if you give proper tools. The proper tools once. You don't need to repeat the workflow and stuff like this. Just give the tools to everyone, right? The user reset the password and so on. And you give them one instruction. And the agent will periodically check for alerts of certain type and act upon it accordingly. So replacing the composable workflows, the whole thing, or maybe a part first and more. So it's a gradual process of transition from, let's say, predefined flows to English, in essence.
Yeah. So I'd say similar to what we train people to do. We train and we give them skills incrementally, right? It's like you're not gonna have day one an expert. So we may have a trainee and you train them on something, they practice something, you give it more skills, but it's the same person, some admin, but they're getting more skills that now they can do this action, that action. So instead of just unlocking users, maybe they are, even reaching out to the user and say, hey, can you authenticate here and validate this and that before they would take the final action? So I like this compostable idea of just basically taking orchestration, injecting the AI agents, and then enriching that without having like very static definition of a process workflow. That's definitely I'd see a value there.
One interesting observation, and it's kind of my prediction for the future, is when machines start building the machines. The Skynet thing. So we can actually make the AI agent be able to create new tools.
Right.
That always sounds scary a little bit, but
yeah. So once they take an action, right, and then at the end they say, "I'll be back."
Exactly. Yeah. So when we start creating the tools based on, I've done that in many steps. Maybe they should have a single tool, for example.
New, right? New.
So
yeah.
What they would do in IT-Conductor, it would create a process definition and put it there, and then create a tool to instantiate that process definition in the response.
Very
So
cool.
it's like taking what is done and create the workflows. So instead of us composing the workflows, it will start composing the workflows. That's
I'm
I don't know
gonna
how
I'm
patent.
gonna I'm gonna say all of this is gonna affect what the new relevant. What I see is the new SAP Basis role, right? Because we are talking about operation guys. What does it mean? All this agentic AI orchestration workflow time. So I think in 2026, really, they can't be operator anymore. They have to go to architecting tools. What can be done from an architect standpoint, solutioning, rather than just reacting as a firefighter. You go to more like a policy designer. You designing the policies of what take care 90%, and then what is the exception. So you're going from that kind of fighting mode to more proactive mode. And then instead of just manually executing something, actions, going into this menu, clicking there, or running this script, or manually doing something, we call it an executor, moving to more of what we call a governor of autonomous systems, right? So as governor, we govern, we look at all the agents, what are they capable of, all the things that come in that they process, what have they done, and what are the results. So you're governing autonomous systems. So in that sense, you're elevating the role of the SAP basis. So all regular basis guy who just do manual things in clicking and reacting, those jobs will go away. And our prediction is probably, I'd say 50% of them don't need to exist at all, right? You have to do intelligent architect work, the policy designer work, and the kind of the governor work. So the most valuable SAP professional are those who can encode this operational intent into the agentic systems. They become the DNA of the agentic workflow era, right? Rather than just sitting there and checking my procedure and do these manual tasks and things like that.
The
So that's
mastermind,
cool.
right?
So that's a prediction, because I myself I love doing basis work for a long time, but I hate it when it's repetitive, and I hate it when it's very manual and require a lot of time to analyze and do things. But I would love being an architect and designing workflows and just governing. Right? I'd say, hey, this is my dashboard of so many actions. Automation, and I can look at those automation. I can look at the results of them. I can go and create new policies. I can, train new systems and say, I need a tool that will glue together these three activities into one orchestrated workflow. That's what I'd rather be doing. And that's really, I think, elevates the future for these kind of automated or autonomous. If we have autonomous driving, right, full self-driving, why do we not have autonomous IT operations, not just SAP, but entire enterprise IT in general? So the future we see is that belongs to systems that will act on itself, will self-heal, and then the governance of that will be where the architects, the folks that today are doing manual things, will get increased knowledge on what can be done automatically, and then put governance around that, some guardrails, obviously, what you can do, what you can't do, what permissions some of these should have and should not have, and then these agents will act within the boundaries of regulations, right? We can't have them all going wild and Skynet on us.
Yeah, I mean, on the masterminds, those who left will be the masterminds.
Uh-huh. So again, to recap, passive observability becomes obsolete, right? And then agentic orchestration becomes the mandatory, not just optional, right? And then the control plane replaces dashboards and static items like reports and things like that. So those are our prediction from Lynn and David here at IT-Conductor 2026. And, we are already working on it, and we're doing it. So prediction is half already here. So exciting, and we'll catch you on another episode. Thank you.
Thank you.